Hey everyone, welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable Season 1, Episode 9. I'm your host, Millie Rouge from the band Vienna Whyte, and today's broadcast is brought to you by Yeg Music. We have two incredible guests on today. I'll let them say hi and introduce themselves. So we'll start with Alex.
Hi, my name's Alex Whorms. I am a piano pop singer-songwriter, musician from Hamilton, Ontario.
Beautiful. And Stella, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Stella Lucia Azopardi, aka Childlike. I am an artist, singer-songwriter. I produce everything, and I'm from Toronto.
Cool. Awesome. I love the Toronto pride. That's amazing. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to jump into the questions. And again, feel free to put in as much as you want. But the first thing I kind of want to talk about, just so that the people that are watching get more of an introduction to who you ladies are, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey of how music came to be to where you are today? So how did you kind of start to get into the music business to where you are today? Take us kind of through that journey of how you got there. So whoever wants to start first, just chime in, feel free.
Who wants to go first?
You can go, it doesn't matter.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, I come from a very musical family. My family is in the music industry, and so music came to me naturally. I started playing piano, and every day after school, I would come home, play piano, and I would always write my own songs. So I'd say for the past 3 years or 4 years, I've been producing my own stuff. And I started uploading it, and having a family in the music industry, I have a lot of connections. And so I ended up working in the studio and meeting a bunch of other producers, and I got management in LA. So that's how it came to be.
Cool, that is awesome. And what kind of music is your family involved in? Like, are they in kind of like, are they singer-songwriters themselves? Are they kind of all over the map with music? Like, where do they kind of fall into there?
Well, my dad, he's a drummer. He started out drumming and like playing all around North America. And then he decided, playing was fun, but I want to be a producer. I want to have my own company. And so he opened up his own record label, and he was doing R&B in the 90s for a while, got a Juno. That's how it was for him. And then my mom, she was in engineering, and then she started singing, and she joined a band, and she dropped out, and one thing led to another, and now she sings and tours all of North America.
Cool.
So, yeah.
That's really awesome. That's really cool that you have that background. Like, I know a lot of artists, their parents are usually like, but like you kind of said, like they're like engineers or they're teachers, and they don't really have any background with music. So that's really nice that you had kind of that like support system to kind of help guide you. I know like when you first start out in music, it's kind of like, okay, where do I start? But that's really nice that you had that backing system kind of to help guide you to wherever you wanted to go, right? That's really awesome. And what about you, Alex? Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love how both of us are sitting next to our pianos.
Yeah.
Stella has one behind her, and I've got mine right here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I also, my first instrument was piano, and it's still my primary instrument. I believe I was 6 or 7 when I started taking classical piano and classical singing lessons, and I was very much the classical music kid for a very long time. Same kind of thing, got home, played for hours every day, and I actually coincidentally got into musical theater when I was 12 or 13, and for a while that was my thing, was being in shows. So I would be in the cast someplace. I did crew work. I played in the pit band very often too. And I kind of, I don't have a musical family. A lot of my family plays for fun, but most of my family are in medical professions or engineering as well. So I never really had an example of, as much as I love music, I didn't have anyone to look up to who was doing it as a career. And on the contrary, it was very, very obvious to me how to get into a science career. So I just kind of, I kind of didn't pursue it too much out of high school. I went to McMaster University in Hamilton for science at first. But Hamilton has a very, very incredible, vibrant, independent music scene. And then after I moved there, I kind of saw and put the puzzle together of how do you make a career out of this, because of the people I met in Hamilton. And what really, so I started performing. I had begun writing my own music at that point as well. So I started performing in bars and restaurants down there. I joined a couple of bands. Um, just, I got lots of practice. And then what happened, what really kind of sealed the deal on a music career for me, I did an exchange at New York University. And so I spent several months living in Manhattan. And after my classes there for the first time were all arts related. So I had drama, I had like Meisner technique, which is an acting technique. I had vocal performance. I had all of these really artsy classes. And on top of that, 6 nights a week, I went out to New York City open mics, and I practiced, talking to crowds and performing original songs and stuff. And then I came back and I was like, okay, that's it. No more science. That's the end. And that was the end. And since then, I've put out 2 EPs, recorded and released with my band. We've done like the Ontario Festival circuit.
Nice.
And yeah, and here I am. I give piano and singing lessons as well right now, and that is my life.
Really cool. That's really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, ladies. Just so you guys know a little bit about me as well, I guess I should kind of tell you who I am so I'm not some stranger. I live in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm part of a band called Vienna, Whyte, so kind of how we contacted you. There actually is 2 members to part of our bands, like we're a female pop duo. But I actually do the round table talk and she does the Instagram live stream. So if you guys are scheduled for an Instagram live stream, it'll actually be Marissa who's the one chatting. So you'll get to meet the both of us. But we both had a similar kind of upbringing where we were kind of in that musical theater / singing lessons, piano lessons all our life. And Marissa and myself are actually both pretty immersed with the piano as an instrument. So I find it really cool that you ladies also are kind of in that piano world, because I find it very rare in Edmonton, at least, to see a lot of female piano players. But yeah, so we both actually went to the Grant MacEwan University program for music. So we both actually went to the same school, and that's kind of how we met as a band. And since then, we've both done our own individual solo projects. But right now we're really focusing on this pop duo and we're having a lot of fun. We're kind of in that indie pop genre, and we're just trying to expand ourselves on social media as much as possible and really like in the Edmonton music scene. So I'm really curious to kind of get your guys' opinions about some of these questions I have today. My first really quick question is, have both of you lived in Ontario your whole lives?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure, because if you've only been there for like a year or so, I was curious because it would make a difference. And I know you both kind of have different music scenes, because the Toronto music scene and in Hamilton music scene, I'm imagining, is a bit different. So you can kind of take your turns if you'd like. But can you describe what the music scene is like in Ontario or Toronto, kind of specifically, wherever you want to go with that?
Did you want to go ahead or? Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I'm just starting. I'm just a young artist in Toronto, but from what I have noticed so far, it is very competitive. It's a constant race. Who's got the most connections? Who's got the most followers? I sat down with a development company recently, and they're like, "We're not going to work with you until you have 40,000 followers."
Wow.
But at the end of the day, I was like, "Isn't it about the music?" So that's what it's like. Finding live events is very hard in Toronto. I can say that.
So you would think it'd be easier because of the population, but I could totally see, just because there's so many people, it's just hard to land like a gig, because it's all booked and filled, right? So I could totally see that. Yeah, and that's kind of what I've heard. So that's kind of what I expected it to be like. And what about in Hamilton, Alex? How does that kind of differ with the music scene?
I've played in Hamilton and in Toronto several times. They're so close together that, it's kind of a no-brainer to be involved in both.
Yeah.
I find, I haven't had too much trouble as far as finding gigs. There are a lot of smaller venues that really like to support and have emerging artists there. I definitely feel I'm going to speak to Hamilton, Hamilton is extremely friendly and extremely welcoming. The venues themselves, as well as the community, it's really, really rooted in the community to go out and support artists. So the attitude towards independent art is extremely supportive in Hamilton, as opposed to, like, I grew up in Ajax, Ontario, which is east of Toronto, and Ajax is more of a suburb, a corporate area. So like, I didn't even know that it was possible to make music independently. So Hamilton what is perfect for somebody, especially for somebody starting out, because they love that, they love everything about that. As far as Toronto, I haven't had a very difficult time. Not that I've done as much as Stella probably has, or somebody who lives down there. I think it depends a lot on the type of venues you're contacting, or maybe it depends on style of music.
Exactly.
For me, I've had quite an easy time just, chatting with other artists who make a similar enough style of music, and jumping on bills with people. And we'll do very often, I'll open for an artist who's Toronto based, and then they'll come back to Hamilton and they'll open for me in Hamilton, kind of thing. So in the world of independent artists, for sure, I think just even in Toronto, the attitude really seems to be extremely collaborative and supportive. So getting gigs, I personally haven't had that much trouble. I will say there isn't a ton of money out there in the smaller venues, right? So it really kind of, the tough part, I think, is making money, and which gets easier, the more you do and the more listeners you reach and stuff. So that's just a build, that's a marathon, right? I don't know.
No, that totally makes sense. And I know, like, here in Edmonton, it's actually really interesting that you brought that up, because we are quite our population's around, like, I don't know the exact number, but it's around like 1 million. So we're still quite a large city, but we definitely cater to specific genres in the music scene. So a lot of like our indie pop, or like singer-songwriter rock does very, very well. But I find like that kind of rap, hip hop, even metal kind of scene it's a bit difficult, and we just don't have enough venues that support that style of music. So I think it, like you kind of said, it depends where you are and what kind of genre of music you do. It can be super difficult to cater to that. And it's interesting because Toronto is such a large area compared to like Hamilton, for example, quite a little bit bigger, but they have more venues, I think, that could support those different genres. But again, there's just so many people that I can imagine it still being really difficult. But that's very interesting. And my next question was, with a place like Ontario, do you find it difficult to get music due to just the size and just gigs? But that kind of answers the question itself, so that's amazing. What kind of ways do you find you ladies have to set yourself apart from other musics in such a huge music scene? Like, what kind of tips or like ways have you kind of navigated yourself to stand out compared to every other pop artist or every R&B artist? What kind of ways have you found yourself kind of trying to stand out against the others?
That's an interesting question. For me, I guess it would just be like breaking rules. I mean, I like to combine genres. So that's what I do. Personally.
I think that's pretty cool, because I know some artists feel like they have to stray to like one genre. And I think that's like kind of like, if you think like Post Malone, he's very mixed in his genres. He does like, sometimes he'll throw out like a really indie pop kind of sounding song, and then the other times he's throwing out these like hardcore like rap kind of tunes. So I totally agree with that. I think kind of combining your style can really help to stand yourself out. But what do you think, Alex? I know Hamilton's, again, a little bit smaller, but what kind of ways have you found yourself standing out compared to other artists?
I think for me, it's more to do with really, really knowing, understanding myself and what my music is.
Totally.
For me, I think a lot, in Hamilton, there's a really big punk scene. I think just
Oh,
my
interesting.
sound kind of in itself stands out in Hamilton.
Yeah.
I can think of what off the top of my head in Hamilton, one other act who is kind of similar to mine.
Oh, interesting.
So like
Wow.
for me, like, it's like piano pop, Sarah Bareilles,
Yeah.
Regina Spektor type sound.
Love it. Yeah.
Um, uh, so not a lot of people are really doing that
Hmm.
in Hamilton, and even in Toronto. Like I haven't networked as much in Toronto as I would like to, but I can think of again one or two people who are doing something that I could almost recognize, like something that could also have been my song.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it comes down to, as far as standing out, just really owning, like really understanding what you're about and what your sound is
Hmm.
completely, and then owning that when you're on there. And yeah, and just you know making sure that that comes across in your social media and in your press kit when you're trying to get these gigs and
Yeah.
when you're pitching yourself. um it all kind of ties together. It's like you need to know it, and you need to make sure that it's easy to understand for somebody who's looking at your materials.
Yeah, absolutely. And Childlike, I'm interesting to know in Toronto, what kind of scenes, what kind of genres do you think are the most popular in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's probably like hip hop rap. In
Mm,
my opinion, yeah.
okay.
Some alternative, definitely. A little bit of R&B.
Yeah, because I think if you think
Mm.
about the most people that have become, if you will, the most famous from Toronto, like we have Drake, who's kind of in that rap scene. I know there's another one out that came to Edmonton, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he was a rap artist as well. I know Justin
Is it The
Bieber.
Weeknd? I think
Yeah, The Weeknd too, but there's someone else I'm thinking.
there's Alicia
Yeah,
Cara.
that's a good point. The Weeknd, Alicia Cara, exactly, and they kind of dive
Mhm.
more into that hip hop / pop scene. So I could definitely see how that's more of a populated genre for sure. And Alex, you said the genre in Hamilton's more punk, hey?
There's a lot of punk. There's a lot of folky singer
Oh, okay.
songwriter type. There's a really good blend.
Mm-hmm.
There's also people on more the indie electronic side.
Yeah,
As far as I can tell, not very much of the rap R&B, but maybe I just haven't seen it.
yeah,
But yeah, lots of
yeah.
singer songwriter, lots of folk, and lots of punk rock
Cool.
groups. Um,
Very interesting. Yeah, because I know here in Edmonton we have kind of like slight more of a blend, but punk is one of those kind of niche genres. So that's really cool that there's a little bit more in Hamilton. All right. So just give me a sec here. Would you say, in your opinion, because I've had this discussion with lots of different artists, I actually met with the producer who I worked with pretty closely, and he had mentioned he lived in Toronto for a few years and in the Ontario area. And he said that he found it really, really hard when he moved there because his goal was kind of, yeah, I'll move to Toronto, like it's a bigger scene, I'll make it there because it's bigger than Edmonton. But when he
Mhm.
came back, he was pretty frustrated because, I mean, obviously it hadn't worked out to his expectations. And he said, oh, like a place like Edmonton or a smaller music scene is so much easier to make your mark and to really establish like a good fan base. And there's no need to be in such a big crowd to kind of hope to God that like someone will notice you. So my question for you ladies is kind of, do you think a smaller community is easier to stand out and become successful in compared to a larger community where there's more opportunities available? What kind of do you think would be, I know you're both from kind of different communities, so I'm kind of interested to see what you would think is a better community to kind of gravitate towards, like a larger one or a smaller community.
Hmm.
I oh go
No, you go ahead.
honestly, like I think if you can, why stick to one community? Go on, like
Mm,
go. For me, it's like and obviously I don't really know the answer to that question because I have my two main bases, Hamilton and Toronto. I can't
mhm.
really, the sample size is very small. That's two
Yeah.
places. But uh, but I've also, so I've played in Toronto. I've driven all the way down to Simcoe, kind of North
Mhm.
County, which is, an hour and a half. north. Yes, I don't know, in one direction. I've been to Toronto. I've gone down to Kingston. I've gone down to Montreal. I've gone to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So I feel as though, I think Hamilton, yes, is smaller, and I definitely felt like, my first EP came out in 2017 in Hamilton, and from 2 years later, I won the Hamilton Arts Award for Emerging Artist in Music. So I think for somebody who's really active in Hamilton, not very long, but I think the reason for that is not because Hamilton is small. I think it's because Hamilton is very engaged with musicians. So I think it depends more on, is there a hunger in that community for your style of music, and are you active, and do you do it well? Like if people in an area like what you're doing, then you're going to do well, right? But I also think, it's just important. It all depends on getting yourself into the right situations, into the right venues, and just being, very, very active. If that answers the question, and just going to like lots of different communities, because you don't want to oversaturate yourself in any one place. Like you need to
grow a
little
little bit.
People get tired. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, because you mentioned you were in not Hamilton, New York for a while, and you're in Manhattan. How did you find the music scene there? I'm curious because I know it's obviously, I'm imagining, quite large, because New York is large, obviously. So how would you kind of compare that to other communities maybe you've been in before?
Well, New York is, like you said, it's very crowded. So I was living at the time, if you've ever been to East Village, Manhattan, which is like, it's like the nicest area, like based on what I've seen of New York City. And I was like, I was close to, I was at Avenue C and East 5th Street or something like that. And Avenue A, 2 blocks down from where I was living at the time in 2017, it was lined with music venues, just a whole avenue of it. Like, so I would walk down to my favorite open mic there was the Sidewalk Cafe, which is no longer the Sidewalk Cafe. It was new owners or something. But one of, if you know Regina Spektor at all, she's one of my greatest musical influences. She used to go, and she's from the Bronx. She used to play the Sidewalk Cafe. So I immediately went like, I need to go there.
Yeah.
But walking down there every Monday night, I would pass, like, it was 2 blocks. It was like a 5-minute walk. And I would pass like 7 or 8 venues. There'd be jazz, and then I'd walk another 5 steps, and there'd be rock, and then there'd be something else. So there's so much music going on, and mind you, when I was in New York, I was at the very beginning of doing this. So I was going to open mics to practice. I wasn't trying to gain a following at that point. I was more practicing. And so I can't really speak to, how easy or difficult it is there. I think it would be hard on one hand, because there's so much going on every night. There's probably 50 concerts to choose from on any given night of the week, right? So how to get people out. But at the same time, a friend of mine who was in my class at the time was a stand-up comedian, and still is. And he was telling me, there's no other city in the world but New York where you can play a different venue every night of the week in the same city and have a whole different crowd there every night. So in that way, you can, in a place like Hamilton, you can't perform twice a week. People will stop coming. In New York, you totally can, because there's so many people out there. So, I think, pros and cons for a place like New York, because if you're just trying to get in front of new people, then like you absolutely can hypothetically do that very easily. So I don't know. That's all I kind of absorbed in the time that I was there. I haven't really been back as much since that initial couple of months of living there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never actually been to the States before, which is very weird, but I've never ventured out there. But it seems like, it would be very interesting to be in New York for a short while. I don't know if I could ever permanently live in New York for the rest of my life, but it would be a very interesting chapter just to try for a few months. And Childlike, I'm just kind of interested in hearing what you think, because do you find because you're based in Toronto, do you find it would be easier to be in a place like Edmonton per se, or Vancouver, or do you think living in a place with more opportunities that are just more abundant, so it seems, would be easier, or do you think it'd be a little bit more tricky?
Well, I agree with what Alex had to say. Like, why not do both areas?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't see what's wrong in reaching a wider audience. I don't have much live experience, but I would just throw myself into any environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. If I myself, as an Edmontonian, if I were to move to Ontario next week, let's say, and I was kind of starting up all over again and testing the waters in that music scene, what would you tell someone that's new to the area of how best to succeed, either just in the music scene itself or just like in different venues in Ontario? What would kind of be your tips or tricks for how they can do the best in a new area?
Know yourself and know your goal. Know what you want. Know what makes you happy. Yeah, that's pretty much what I would say. I would say get music out as much as possible. Tell your mom, tell your mom's sister, tell everyone, make those connections. Just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Do you find do you find people that if they were to come to Ontario with like no goals or no realistic expectations, do you find really quickly that they kind of get that reality check compared to like in a bigger place?
I would agree so. I had a conversation with someone and they asked me what I wanted to be, and I said the wrong thing. Like, I've always wanted to be in music, but they're like, specifically, what do you want to do in music? And I said, I don't know. And they got scared. They didn't want to work with me. So since that moment, I know what to say.
Yeah, no, that's actually really awesome, because I think when you're pretty straightforward and you know you're exactly like you said, like your goals, it helps other people to want to work with you, and you sound like you're just more invested into your career rather than taking it as like something really lightly, for sure. And Alex, what about you? What would you kind of give us some suggestions or some tips for people just trying out a new area like Ontario itself?
I would say, there's, an endless amount of advice, especially because indie artists today need to assume the role of social media manager and
Yeah.
publicist and radio promoter and tour manager, right? There's so much. I would say for somebody just coming into Ontario, and for anyone who's been in Ontario forever, like I'm still doing this. So one thing would be networking with other artists. So going, like, there are a lot of networking events. I was just at a Factor International Women's Day thing last month, which was great. I am Factor funded, so I got to meet like a lot of the people who are doing similar things through Factor and whatnot. So networking, that was a great night, because you meet, I met some people who I knew of, who I hadn't actually met. You never know.
Right.
Those are people you can go on tour with or can help you with things. I think it's important to be active live for practice, and just and also, so those are probably the two things. Open mics are good for practicing as well. So when you're not actively touring, you're still getting up on a stage and trying out new material and stuff. So
Totally.
performing actively and networking, I think.
Awesome. Really cool. And I
Helpful.
was looking on your social media, Alex, before, and you played at Canadian Music Week. Is that correct?
I did last
Okay.
year.
Last year. And where was it? Was it held in, is it always held in Toronto, Canadian Music Week?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. Can you kind of tell us about your experience? I know you did like a showcase opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
Oh man, I'm, if not for the COVID pandemic,
Yeah.
I'd be in rehearsal for Canadian Music Week right now, which is making me kind of sad.
Yeah.
Last year was my first Canadian Music Week. I wasn't expecting to get selected, but I was, and we brought a whole band there. So it's a 3 or 5 days. It's quite a long conference. So it's a whole week. And through the week, they have artists doing showcases at Toronto venues, so just like any kind of concert, and those are open to the public. And often people take that opportunity to invite industry people to their showcase, because everyone flocks to Toronto. Everyone in the music industry flocks down for this this conference. So everyone's all in the same place. So performances are one part of it, and then they have presentations through the conference that you can attend on all sorts of subjects. Because my band was selected to perform, we all got complimentary wristbands to go to all the talks. So and from everything to, you know, how to build an EPK, or, you know, they had one-on-ones with producers, and they had presentations on sync placements and performance even, and all sorts. Like I didn't want to leave. I basically spent, you know, the entire week downtown, and I'd get home and have 4 hours of sleep and then go straight back downtown. So a really, really great way. And you come with like a pack of business cards, and you just meet everybody you can. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Really, really, really great experience. And I was really looking forward to it this year. So they scheduled it to September. So hopefully by then we'll be able to go.
Yeah, we'll see, hopefully.
or 2021 CMW.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually myself went to Canadian Music Week 2-3 years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but I strictly went for just the shows themselves. And I know they have like you said, those presentations that my friend actually, she went to them, and I would just go to the shows with her at night. But it was like you said, with the business cards and having that opportunity, I think Canadian Music Week is such a crucial thing for any Toronto artist or anyone in the near area. Like we obviously came from Alberta, so we were quite far, but even then we met so many people that to this day I was like, I would love to just like go back every year just to do the networking in the community. And I remember I met one girl who lived in Vancouver, and I was like, oh, that's really awesome. And she's like, yeah, most of the time I'm in Nashville though. So she's like, anytime you want to sleep on my couch, just like message me and you can come and hang out. And I was like, I just met you, but I mean, you seem really nice, so I'm totally going to take you up on that one day. But it's just incredible, the different kind of connections you can make, for sure. Alrighty, that's actually all the time we have for today. Zoom only lets me record for a certain amount of time, unfortunately. So thank you so much again, ladies, for coming on and kind of giving your perspective on the Ontario music scene. It was a huge eye-opener for me, so I think kind of our fan base in Edmonton will really want to hear from what you guys have to say as well. So my name's Millie Rouge. This roundtable again has been brought to you by Yeg Music. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell button if you want to be notified about our shows that come out. And we release our shows Monday to Friday, so there's always content to watch. So I'll let you ladies sign off and say your goodbyes, and then we are out for the day.
Yeah, thanks so much. So nice to meet you, and I hope we'll be on tour together soon when this pandemic has run its course.
Absolutely, I would love that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a great experience.
Absolutely. Have a great day, ladies. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.